License and registration. The words came sharp and sudden through the rolled-down window. Naomi Carter looked up, confused, one hand still gripping her iced coffee, the other resting on the steering wheel. She blinked against the morning sun. She hadn't even seen the patrol car behind her. "Ma'am, I said license and registration." The voice was firmer now, colder. Officer Bradley Knox stood by her driver's side, one hand on his holster, the other already holding his citation pad. Naomi reached into her purse slowly. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, polite, measured. She was a law student. She knew the drill. Knew how fast things could go left for someone who looked like her. Knox didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned her car, then rested on the small air freshener hanging from her rearview mirror. "Obstruction of vision," he muttered. "And your brake light's out." Naomi frowned. "I just got my car serviced 2 days ago." Knox leaned in slightly. "Step out of the vehicle." "What?" She looked at him, startled. "Officer, I don't understand." "Now," he snapped. Naomi's heart pounded. She looked around. Traffic had slowed. A man across the street started filming. She could feel eyes on her. Still, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, her hands visible, trembling slightly. Knox immediately turned her around and started patting her down. "Officer, I didn't do anything." "You resisted a lawful order," he said, pulling her hands behind her back. "You're being detained." "For what?" she cried, panic rising in her throat. "Failure to comply." With a click, the handcuffs tightened around her wrists. Naomi looked up at him, tears pooling in her eyes. "This is wrong. You're making a mistake." Knox leaned in, his voice low. "People like you always say that." As he marched her toward his squad car, Naomi's phone fell from her lap to the pavement. The screen lit up. "Incoming call, Mayor Carter." Knox didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. He shoved her into the back seat like she was nothing more than a criminal, slammed the door, and walked back to collect her license. The crowd had grown. Someone was yelling. Another was live streaming. But none of it mattered to him. He had done this 100 times. He had the badge. He had the power. Naomi sat in the back seat, staring at the cage between her and the front of the car. Her shoulders shook, but not from fear anymore. There was something else, an eerie calm. She muttered quietly to herself. "You don't know who I am, but you're about to find out." The camera stayed on the flashing red and blue lights. The siren wailed, echoing down the block, while the live stream chat exploded with angry comments. But Knox? He just smirked. He thought it was just another arrest. He didn't know he just made the biggest mistake of his career. Officer Bradley Knox leaned back in his worn leather chair at the precinct, sipping lukewarm coffee as he tapped out his report with the same confidence he'd carried for years. He called it routine documentation, but really it was a shield, one he'd learned to sharpen to perfection. He titled the incident, "Non-compliance suspect, possible narcotics suspicion, aggressive demeanor." Aggressive? Naomi Carter hadn't raised her voice once. But Knox knew what to write. He always knew what to write. Across the room, Officer Denise Alvarez glanced at him over her screen. She'd seen the body cam footage as it uploaded. Seen Naomi's restraint. Heard the fear in her voice. And yet, she watched Knox typing, casual, whistling under his breath like he'd just given a parking ticket. "You really putting aggressive?" she asked flatly. Knox didn't even look up. "It's protocol. If someone questions orders, it's non-compliance. If they resist stepping out, it's elevated threat. I'm just keeping the streets clean." Alvarez didn't respond. She just stared at him, her jaw clenched. Downstairs in the holding cells, Naomi sat on a cold steel bench wrapped in silence. Her phone had been confiscated. Her wrists still ached from the cuffs. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the cement floor. Hours passed. At one point, the cell door creaked open. Alvarez stepped in, holding a small blanket and a bottle of water. "You cold?" she asked, her voice low. Naomi nodded, her eyes still puffy but focused. Alvarez passed her the blanket and sat beside her. For a moment, they didn't speak. Then Alvarez said, "You should file a complaint." "I saw the footage." Naomi's voice was quiet, steady. "I won't need to." "Why not?" She looked up at her, almost apologetically. "Because he's already in over his head. He just doesn't know it yet." Back upstairs, Knox handed in his report. His supervisor, Captain Darrell, barely glanced at it before signing off. "Another day, another non-compliant," Darrell muttered, tossing the paper on a stack of a dozen more just like it. Knox shrugged. "Exactly." The confidence in his walk, the relaxed swing of his keys, it was the swagger of a man who'd worn the badge too long without consequences. Knox had been accused before. Complaints. Letters. Community protests. But they always blew over. He always walked away clean. He didn't know this time would be different. In the locker room, Knox changed out of his uniform, humming to himself. On the TV in the corner, a news ticker scrolled past, Mayor Carter to address public safety at upcoming town hall. He didn't notice. Didn't care. Meanwhile, Naomi finally stepped out of holding. Paperwork done. Fingerprints inked. Record temporarily stained. But she walked tall. A quiet storm brewing beneath her composure. Outside, a sleek black sedan waited. The driver stepped out, opened the door for her. She slipped in silently. As the car pulled away, Naomi stared out the window, her reflection merging with the city lights. Her lips moved almost inaudibly. Court date set. And this time, the courtroom wouldn't be hers to fear. It would be his. The courthouse buzzed like a hive the morning of the hearing. Lawyers shuffled papers. Phones buzzed with reminders. Reporters loitered at the front steps, sensing a story but not yet knowing why. Officer Bradley Knox strolled in like he owned the place. Pressed uniform. Aviator sunglasses. A smirk tucked beneath his clean-shaven jaw. He walked with the weight of assumed victory, the weight of a man who believed the system was built for him to win. Morning, counselor, he said to the city prosecutor, tossing a wink. Another open and shut? The prosecutor barely looked up. Let's hope. Knox leaned against the wall outside courtroom 3B, eyes scanning the hallway. Then he saw her. Naomi Carter. No orange jumpsuit. No handcuffs. She walked in wearing a sleek black suit, hair braided neatly, face calm, unreadable. At her side was a tall black man in a navy blue suit, briefcase in one hand, eyes sharp as glass. Not just any defense attorney, Elliot James, former federal prosecutor, now one of the most respected private attorneys in the state. Knox's smirk faltered for half a second. Just half. Who the hell can afford that guy? He muttered. The courtroom doors opened. The judge walked in. All rise. Testimony began. Knox was first. He sat with a straight back, answering confidently, smoothly. Did you fear for your safety, Officer Knox? Yes. The suspect was uncooperative and displayed erratic behavior. Did you give clear, lawful instructions? I did. Repeatedly. She chose to ignore them. Did you find any illegal substances or weapons on her person or in the vehicle? No, but her attitude suggested. Stick to facts, officer, the judge cut in sharply. Knox adjusted in his seat. Still confident. Still firm. Then it was Naomi's attorney's turn. Elliot James rose slowly, methodically, and clicked a remote. A projector screen came to life. First, a bystander's video. Naomi standing calmly. No resistance. No raised voice. Next, Knox's own body cam footage. The audio played aloud. The courtroom went silent. Naomi's voice, is there a problem, officer? Knox's voice, step out of the vehicle. Naomi's voice, I don't understand. Knox yelling, then silence as the cuffs clicked. Elliot paused the video. Is this the behavior you'd describe as aggressive, officer? Knox shifted. Context matters. Elliot leaned in. You filed in your report that she attempted to flee. I assumed she was about to. You assumed? Yes. Elliot took a slow step forward. Did you know she called someone moments before your arrest? No. Did you check the incoming call on her phone? No. Elliot turned to the judge. Your Honor, that call was from her brother, Mayor Carter. We have phone records confirming it. A wave of murmurs rippled across the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel. Order. Knox's face drained of color. He looked over at Naomi. She still hadn't said a word. Just stared back with those same steady eyes. After the hearing recessed, Knox stood in the hallway, his heartbeat thudding against his ribs. He looked around like the walls were closing in. That name echoed in his head, Mayor Carter. He rubbed his forehead, sweating now. No way. And then he saw them. Naomi stepping into the hallway, her brother standing beside her. No press. No drama. Just power. Quiet, sharp, undeniable power. She didn't say anything as they passed. Didn't have to. Knox stayed frozen in place, realization wrapping around his neck like a noose. He hadn't arrested just anyone. He just dragged the mayor's sister into court on a lie. And the world was about to hear all of it. That evening, Naomi's story exploded across every screen. Mayor's sister wrongfully arrested. Officer under investigation. The video footage. The courtroom recording. The body cam leak. It was everywhere. Twitter. Instagram. The local news. National outlets. Hashtags started trending. Hashtag justice for Naomi. Hashtag badge of abuse. Hashtag knocks out. And yet, while the internet burned, Officer Bradley Knox sat alone in his apartment, beer bottle in hand, TV glowing in front of him. His face, flashed across the screen with the words, "Pattern of harassment? Prior complaints surface." He leaned forward, squinting. What the hell? They were pulling his old cases, digging them up. That one from 2 years ago. The woman who said he yanked her out of a lift. The high school kid he accused of jaywalking. None of it had ever stuck until now. His phone buzzed violently. Dozens of missed calls. His union rep. His captain. Even his old partner. He ignored them all. His hands were shaking. Across town, in the mayor's office, a quiet war council was forming. Mayor Terrence Carter stood by the window, arms folded, jaw tight. "He cuffed my sister like she was a criminal," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His chief of staff responded, "We've uncovered 3 internal complaints that were quietly dismissed." "And now?" the mayor asked. "They won't stay quiet anymore." Mayor Carter turned. "Good. Let's make sure of that." The next morning, Knox walked into the precinct, the room silent as he entered. I followed him. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. No greetings, no smirks, just a vacuum of tension. Captain Darrell stood waiting by the office door. "Inside. Now." Knox stepped in, stiff. The captain shut the door behind him and dropped a folder on the desk. 32 reports. Body cam inconsistencies. False charges. Patterns of bias. I've got the Civilian Oversight Committee breathing down my neck. "I followed procedure," Knox argued. "You've seen how these people—" Darrell slammed his fist on the desk. "Don't finish that sentence." Knox blinked. The captain's face was stone. "You think that badge makes you untouchable?" he hissed. "You brought the mayor's sister into court on a bogus charge, and now the whole damn city's on fire. I didn't know who she was. That's the damn point." A long silence. Then Darrell threw a sealed envelope on the desk. "Effective immediately. Administrative leave pending full investigation. Badge. Gun. Now." Knox stood frozen. "You serious?" "Dead serious." Slowly, Knox reached into his belt and removed his weapon. Then the badge. He placed them on the desk, one after the other. Felt like peeling off armor he'd worn too long. As he turned to leave, Darrell added coldly, "You didn't just embarrass this department. You exposed it." Outside, reporters waited like sharks. Knox stepped into the blinding sun. Microphones flew toward him. Cameras rolled. "Officer Knox, do you have any comment? Did you falsify your report? Are you a racist, Officer Knox?" He pushed through them, silent, head down. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to be the one on trial. That night, Naomi sat on the rooftop of her apartment, staring out at the city skyline. Elliot sat beside her, silent for a while before speaking. "You did it." Naomi shook her head. "It's not done yet." She looked down at her phone, messages from strangers, supporters, victims. People who had stories too. People who finally felt seen. And as the wind swept across her face, she whispered, "Now we make sure it never happens again." The precinct was in full lockdown mode. The lobby, once a dull stretch of gray tile and echoing boots, now pulsed with tension. Protesters gathered outside, signs raised, voices loud. "We want justice. Hold him accountable. No more cover UPS." Inside, Captain Darrell stood in front of a crowded press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Sweat lined his brow, but his voice was steady. "As of today, Officer Bradley Knox is under internal investigation, and we've opened a full review of prior incidents connected to his service record. We will cooperate fully with external oversight agencies." He paused, then added, "Let me be clear, no one is above accountability. Not even those who wear the badge." Knox sat at home, staring at his living room wall like it owed him an answer. His suspension papers lay on the table. Social media had turned him into a villain overnight. Comments poured in under every news article. "This is why we protest. He's done this before." Finally, someone important got hurt. Protect and serve? More like profile and suppress. He didn't respond. Didn't defend himself. Just watched the spiral. He tried calling his union rep again, voicemail. Tried texting his old partner, no reply. Then came the knock at the door. He opened it slowly. A man in a charcoal suit stood there. Flashed a badge. Internal Affairs. We need to talk. Meanwhile, Naomi walked through a community center buzzing with energy. Volunteers sorted legal aid flyers. Cameras flashed as she took the mic at a public forum filled with young people, parents, retired veterans, people tired of injustice. My arrest wasn't rare, she said into the mic, voice clear. It was common. What made it different was who I'm related to. But that's not good enough. The crowd nodded, murmured in agreement. I want to change the system, not just punish one man. I want policy shifts. Body cam transparency. Complaint tracking. Real consequences. Applause erupted. But Naomi wasn't smiling. Not yet. She wasn't done. At the same time, Knox sat in a small, windowless room. 2 investigators across from him. Voice recorder ticking. Every word he said felt like it weighed 100 pounds. You wrote that Ms. Carter was verbally hostile. Can you point to that in the video? Knox swallowed. She questioned me. That's not hostility. You weren't there. The second investigator leaned in. That's the problem, officer. We've all been there now. And we don't see what you say happened. Knox clenched his jaw. She set me up. Set you up. The man raised an eyebrow. You didn't even know who she was. Knox had no answer. That evening, Naomi sat with her brother in his office. Mayor Carter stared at the city lights from his window. I've spoken with the governor, he said. There's momentum now. Legislative ears are open. We can push this. Naomi nodded, quiet. You sure you want to be at the front of this? I'm already in it, she replied. Might as well lead. He turned to her, eyes proud. Then we'll back you all the way. Back at the precinct, a small but powerful shift began. Officers like Alvarez started speaking out. Whistleblowing. Leaking internal memos. Exposing systemic rot. Knox's name wasn't just tarnished, it was becoming symbolic. A relic of a department that let too much slide for too long. And yet, as the city began to move forward, one question still loomed large. Would justice stop with one man, or finally touch the system that protected him? 3 weeks after the trial, the city felt like it was standing on the edge of something. The protests hadn't stopped. They'd grown. From a few hundred voices outside the precinct to full-blown citywide marches. Streets were flooded with signs, chants, and calls for reform that couldn't be ignored anymore. Naomi stood on a makeshift stage at the city square, not as the mayor's sister, but as the voice of something bigger. They told me to keep quiet, to let the system work, she said into the mic, but the system only works when we push it. So push we will. The crowd roared. She stepped back as speakers behind her rolled out staggering statistics, misconduct cases buried, internal reports ignored, civilian complaints without follow-up. Faces in the crowd weren't just angry. They were ready. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reckoning. Across town, the walls were closing in on Bradley Knox. Internal affairs had leaked. The news now reported he had 12 prior use of force complaints, 7 involving black or brown individuals. Only one ever made it to a review board. None resulted in disciplinary action. He had no idea how to spin this. The union wasn't backing him anymore. The precinct had distanced itself completely. Then came the subpoena. A federal grand jury wanted him to testify. Civil rights violations. Pattern and practice. It wasn't just about Naomi anymore, it was about the entire body of his work. Knox walked into his lawyer's office like a man already drowning. They're trying to destroy me. His lawyer looked unimpressed. They're trying to get to the truth. You just happen to be in the way of it. Knox slammed the table. This isn't justice. His lawyer folded his arms. You thought the badge made you invincible. Now you're learning the hard way it didn't give you the right to harass people, lie in reports, and assume nobody would care. A long silence filled the room. Knox stared down at the table, no words left. Just the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down like a collapsing roof. The next morning, Mayor Carter stood before the city council. Live coverage streamed across every major network. I'm proposing the community oversight bill, he declared. Independent review boards. Real civilian power over police misconduct investigations. Mandatory public body cam audits. And a zero-tolerance policy for falsified reports. Cheers rang out from the crowd watching outside. But inside the chamber, the tension was thick. Council members shifted, whispered. Not everyone was on board. Some worried about backlash from the police union. Others feared political fallout. Naomi sat behind her brother, eyes locked on the council floor. One by one, the votes were cast. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. The final vote came down to Councilwoman Eddings, a swing vote with deep ties to law enforcement. She paused, then spoke slowly into her mic. I vote yes. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Naomi exhaled for the first time in hours. At home, Knox watched it unfold on TV. The system he'd once believed would always protect him had just signed the beginning of its own transformation. He dropped the remote and leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused, a single thought circling in his head like a vulture. What have I done? Bradley Knox sat in the courtroom, suit stiff on his shoulders, hands locked together like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. His name was no longer followed by officer. Just Bradley Knox, defendant. The courtroom was smaller than before, but the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't a petty charge anymore, this was federal. Civil rights violations. Abuse of power. Falsification of records. If convicted, he faced years behind bars. Naomi sat in the back row. Not for revenge. For closure. For everyone who never got a courtroom. For the people whose stories never made it to trending hashtags. She didn't flinch as the prosecutor laid everything bare. The body cam inconsistencies. The mismatched reports. The pattern of intimidation toward people of color. The testimonies. The lies. Knox didn't say a word. Just sat there. A man completely stripped of his shield. Outside, the city was already changing. The Community Oversight Bill had gone into effect. Within weeks, a civilian panel began reviewing dozens of old misconduct cases. Officers once protected by silence now faced investigation. The culture inside the precinct was shifting, slow but real. Recruits were being retrained. Commanders replaced. Whistleblowers protected. For the first time in decades, the community wasn't whispering about police reform, they were witnessing it. Later that evening, Naomi stood in front of the same courthouse she had once walked out of in cuffs. This time, a crowd surrounded her, not with confusion or silence, but with unity. Microphones hovered again. A reporter asked Naomi, "What do you want the world to take from this?" She took a deep breath, "I steady. That justice shouldn't depend on who you're related to. That abuse of power can't hide behind a badge anymore. That change doesn't begin in offices, it begins when people stand up and don't sit back down." The crowd erupted in applause. But Naomi didn't smile in celebration. She smiled in determination. Because it wasn't over. Not even close. Across the city, a mural was painted the following week. On a long wall facing the busiest bus stop downtown. Naomi's face, side by side with names of others who had spoken out. At the top it read, "They tried to silence one, and woke a city instead." People stopped to take photos, left flowers, wrote their own stories in chalk on the pavement below. As for Knox, he was sentenced to 5 years. But what broke him wasn't the prison walls. It was watching the system he thought would always protect him evolve without him. And now to you watching this, what would you have done in Naomi's shoes? Have you ever witnessed abuse of power firsthand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters. If the story moved you, helped you see something differently, or just gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Because storytelling can heal, awaken, and ignite change. And we're just getting started.